Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back. And today we're actually going to pivot just a little bit. We're really going to tackle a character that is not necessarily a comic book character, but is also an iconic character in and out of itself. I'm talking about James Bond 007. I mean, there's been some news and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, but just briefly to touch on James Bond. I mean, 007 is one of the most iconic characters in movie history. I mean, this spanning over the last 60 to 70 years. I mean, Ian Fleming's book has spawned some outstanding movies played by some outstanding actors. You know, there's been over 10 actors to actually portray this really remarkable character. But notably, I'm going to mention just a few. One of them being Roger Moore. I don't know if you're familiar with Roger Moore. I'm actually too young to remember Roger Moore, but I did because I've watched every movie. I remember my dad, one of the very first movies I watched was Live and Let Die. And it's actually my favorite movie in his James Bond series. He did 7 movies. And as a matter of fact, in that movie, he actually ran over some crocodiles. Live crocodiles. I kid you not. I mean, you can find that scene on YouTube. I'll see if I can link it here. But it's crazy that they actually shot this. And you can actually find the production scene on YouTube. So he did 7 movies, followed closely after by Sean Connery. Really, really huge Sean Connery fan, by the way. Who also did 7 movies as James Bond. And my favorite movie of his was Goldfinger, you know, and out of his 7 movies, to me, that's the one I remember the most. That's the one I've watched the most, and I've watched all of them, you know. So I do love James Bond as well. And then obviously soon after that came Pierce Brosnan. A lot of people are familiar with Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. He did 5 movies as James Bond, and my favorite being Die Another Day. Why Die Another Day? Because it also happened to feature Halle Berry as one of the Bond girls. If you know anything about James Bond, there's been a bunch of Bond girls, right? And to me, no, she's not the most favorite, but one of my most favorite is Halle Berry. And trust me, when you watch Die Another Day, and she wasn't just another typical Bond girl. She was an action star. Like, she was his partner in that movie. So, needless to say, if you haven't watched Die Another Day, you should go watch it, especially if you're a Halle Berry fan, you know. But anyway, so Pierce Brosnan obviously did that role justice, because even though he just did 5 movies, it's really hard not to see him as James Bond, right? And this is throughout the 90s, right? And then obviously we come to Daniel Craig. Now, for most of you, especially if you're a Gen Z or younger, you're familiar with Daniel Craig playing James Bond. He also did 5 movies. My favorite being the first one that he did, Casino Royale. That movie is so good. I don't even know how many times I've watched that movie. But with him, with Roger Moore, Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan, we got like a prototypical James Bond. You know what I mean? Sophisticated, suave, kind of not well built, but really have this swag about them. With Daniel Craig, we actually got an interesting version of James Bond. We got a James Bond that is actually physically imposing. Even though the previous James Bonds, obviously they had their own ways of fighting and whatever, but I got tired of watching James Bond lose a lot of fights. And then we got Daniel Craig. I mean, just look at him coming out of the ocean. This was what we were introduced to recently as James Bond. And we love him as James Bond. He's done 5 films, like I said, but also in his series, they've all been connected. So they've told an interesting story from the first movie, Casino Royale, to the last movie. It's been interesting because they've actually been able to tell a story that's actually connected with all his 5 movies, and then obviously culminating with his last movie where he ended up dying, right? So we've had some iconic people play this character. So obviously this is a global icon. And we now find out that Amazon has bought the rights to James Bond or 007 or... And I do not know how to feel about this, because the last time they did that, they bought the rights, the TV rights to the Lord of the Rings, and they produced the Rings of Power. Now the first season was actually pretty decent. The second season, not so much. And a huge part of it, especially from the fan base, was they moved away from what was actually iconic with this series. The Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings is actually one of the most beloved, not only from a book series, but also the movies that they actually did. You know what I mean? So Amazon Studio, it's a big studio. But if you do not respect this IP, and it feels as if from a fan, and not just me saying it, especially when it comes to the Rings of Power and the Lord of the Rings, it looks like they definitely didn't respect, because the second season, the writing just dropped off. And you could tell from the show. I mean, the ratings just dipped. And then now we find out that they bought the rights to James Bond. In this day and age where huge companies acquire the rights for a bunch of stuff, it doesn't really bode well, and I'm sorry to say so, when an American company buys a foreign IP. We've seen it with, obviously, the Lord of the Rings, like I said before. We've seen it with Disney, where they tried to do Doctor Who. Iconic British show that also dipped in ratings, and a huge part of it, again, was you don't respect everything that comes with this. So, on the one hand, there are people who say it's gonna spawn a lot of things. We've never really seen James Bond necessarily on TV. I don't know if I want to, but if they are going to, because the idea from what we've heard is they're going to explore everything from a TV series to movies. You know, we haven't really, because number one, they're still trying to finalize a James Bond. I actually thought they did, because I talked about it a while back. But apparently they're still not committed to who will play James Bond moving forward. My pick is Henry Cavill. The whole world's pick is Henry Cavill. This man looks like James Bond. I don't care what you tell me. This is James Bond. Not only does he look like James Bond, I think he can also play Wolverine. He should play Wolverine, even though it's not comically accurate size-wise, because he's 6'3". In the comics, Wolverine is 5'6", 5'7". But Hugh Jackman is 6'1", so I don't know if it even matters. But anyway, so my pick would be Henry Cavill to play 007. I think this role was tailor-made for him. But anyway, so I don't know how I feel about this. You know, on the one hand, a huge studio brings a lot of money. So I guess my only hope is they get the right people. They take their time to come up with incredible scripts, find good directors, and do not rush it. Because if you, trust me, you do not want the fan base. This is a fan base that has fans in their 80s. You don't want to lose or piss off an entire generation of fans. I mean, this goes 60 to 70 years. So my hope is they respect not only this IP, but they also respect the fan base and give the fan base quality material. Because it's hard to go back and, me personally, and remember a James Bond movie that was not good. Because number one, they took their time. It was never year after year. It was in 2 years, in 3 years. So number one, they always made sure, or at least try to make sure, they got the right actor. And for the most part, they did. The right story, adapt the right plot and storyline from the books, right? Ian Fleming's books. So for the most part, it's been steady. It's been good. It's been really good. So my hope is Amazon Studios, who's given us some really cool stuff like The Invincible, which is actually one of my favorite comic books right now. Not only that, The Boys. Trust me, The Boys has a fan base, huge one globally. So they've done some good things. But a funny thing is, if you go and look in all, those that I mentioned, they did a lot of work behind the scenes to make those, like The Prey and Invincible and The Boys, to make those shows and that movie really good. So again, my thing is, I'm conflicted because on the one hand, this is James Bond. We all love James Bond. I mean, James Bond has spawned also some soundtracks from Tina Turner to Adele to Sam Smith. Some really iconic, soundtracks. Because obviously every movie has its own soundtrack. It's one of those things where the entrance, the scene, the starting scene is always him, and then the song, and then him shooting, and then it's like this iconic thing that comes with, like the way Marvel has this starting, like the Marvel thing, right? The Marvel theme. James Bond has the same thing, and it always comes with its own soundtrack. So, and they're iconic soundtracks, because Adele's soundtrack, that, and Tina Turner's, those soundtracks will live on forever. That's how good they are. But anyway, I didn't know if you are aware of that. I just wanted to make you aware because I'm a huge James Bond fan. Again, I'm not saying that they will do a bad job. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm hoping that they respect this IP all the way, and that they do not tackle this unless they are very sure of what they're doing, because you do not want to alienate or lose a fan base that is generational. People double my age love James Bond. So it's a tall order, and I hope they're just up for the challenge and they give us some really good things, whether it's a TV show, and it's got to be rated R, or at least mature. It's got to be on. You cannot give us a PG-13 James Bond show. No. So let's just hope and wait. I just wanted to get you guys caught up on what's going on. I heard it, and I was kind of conflicted because I was like, we've been hearing a lot of really confusing stories here and there. Because the first one was, we thought they actually found somebody to play James Bond. Turns out they haven't really settled on somebody to play James Bond. So there's so much going on, and then now we hear Amazon. So yeah, so it's one of those things where I don't know, because would you ever see Harry Potter being owned by Amazon? I don't know if would J.K. Rowling ever sell that IP? Hell no, and I hope not, because I don't know. I just don't know. Sometimes you just want to leave things as they are, or be an investor. Just throw your money around, Anyway, just wanted to get you guys caught up on what's going on in the 007 License to Kill James Bond world. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.